Ethan woke up on the morning of their 10th wedding anniversary with a sense of excitement, imagining how the day would unfold. Claire's smile, the small gifts he had carefully chosen, the quiet intimacy of their shared life, the laughter that always seemed to linger in their apartment long after a conversation ended. He imagined breakfast together, teasing each other as he fumbled with the coffee machine, imagining the little note he had written for her tucked into her purse, imagining the warmth of holding her hand later in the evening as they walked through the park near their home, all the ordinary things that had become extraordinary because they shared them. But when he saw Claire that morning, standing by the door in a simple dress, brushing a stray hair behind her ear, he noticed a strange distance in her eyes, a softness that didn't reach him, a pause in her smile that made his stomach tighten. She took a deep breath, her voice almost breaking the quiet of the apartment as she said, "Ethan, I think I need some space." The words felt like a sudden storm breaking through a calm sky, leaving him stunned and unmoored. He blinked, not quite understanding, struggling to connect the phrase to the woman he had known for 10 years, the woman who had once whispered that they could face anything together. "Space?" he asked softly, his voice catching slightly, as if saying it aloud might somehow make it less real. Claire avoided his gaze, as if rehearsing her explanation, as if every word she spoke was measured and fragile. She insisted it wasn't about him, that he hadn't done anything wrong, that it was something she needed for herself, something about her own thoughts and feelings she couldn't fully explain yet. But the way she looked down at her packed bag, the way her hands lingered on the straps as though preparing to leave, told Ethan there was more than she was saying, that this space carried secrets he had yet to understand. She hugged him briefly, but even that hug was careful, restrained, as if both of them were testing the strength of a bond that suddenly felt thinner. When she walked out the door, the click of the lock reverberated in the empty apartment like a drum beat marking the beginning of something unknown, leaving Ethan frozen in place, staring at the closed door, feeling the sudden hollow echo of absence where warmth had always been. His mind raced, flipping through memories of anniversaries past, the laughter, the shared dinners, the whispered "I love yous" in the dark of night, wondering how it had come to this, how a simple word like space could carry the weight of a chasm between them. Ethan tried to reason with himself, telling himself that perhaps it was temporary, that Claire needed time to think, to breathe, to reconnect with herself. But underneath that rational thought, a gnawing fear took hold, the fear that in searching for herself, she might find a version of happiness that no longer included him, the fear that the life they had built together for a decade could be quietly slipping through his fingers. He remembered the first time they met, the awkward smiles, the way she had looked at him as though he was something rare and precious, the way her laughter had drawn him in and made him feel alive in a way he had never known before. And he realized that all those memories now felt fragile, almost like glass, easy to shatter if he didn't act, but also terrifying to confront, because what if confronting it only pushed her further away? The hours stretched on, each one a slow echo of her absence, the apartment suddenly full of silence, each corner holding a memory, each shadow a reminder of the warmth that had just left. And Ethan found himself walking through the rooms aimlessly, touching the familiar surfaces as if that could somehow bring her back, or make sense of the impossible words she had said. He thought of calling her, of texting, of asking questions he knew might not be welcome, of demanding answers he knew she wasn't ready to give, and yet every thought ended in hesitation, because he wanted to respect her wishes, even if it hurt him more than anything he had felt in years. As the day wore on, he found himself sitting by the window, watching the city outside, couples walking hand in hand, people laughing, children playing, life continuing with its usual rhythm, and he felt like he was suspended, like time had split into two currents, one carrying Claire somewhere he couldn't follow yet, the other anchoring him to memories, to hopes, to fears. He remembered the plans they had made for the evening, the dinner reservations he had kept secret, the little bouquet of flowers he had hidden in the fridge, and for a moment, he allowed himself a bittersweet smile, imagining her walking into the room and pretending that nothing had changed, imagining her laughing at a joke only he could make her laugh at, imagining her eyes lighting up at a surprise she didn't suspect. But then reality returned with its quiet, cruel certainty. She was gone. And with her absence came questions that had no answers yet. Questions about love, about commitment, about the hidden corners of a marriage that even 10 years together could not fully illuminate. Ethan's thoughts spiraled into wondering what this space meant for their marriage, whether it was a temporary storm or a warning of deeper currents, whether the love that had once seemed unshakable could survive the quiet distance she now sought. He tried to occupy his mind with work, with tasks, anything that could keep him from thinking about her, but every sound, every shadow, every tiny shift in the apartment reminded him of her presence, or the absence of it. He replayed their conversations from the previous nights, looking for signs, for clues he might have missed, wondering if there were small cracks in their life that he hadn't seen, small moments of doubt that she hadn't shared, moments where she had smiled politely, but her heart was elsewhere. Each thought made him ache. Each memory brought both comfort and pain, and yet he couldn't stop himself from hoping that this space she asked for might not be a farewell but a pause, a moment for her to rediscover herself and perhaps rediscover them. As evening approached, he found himself staring at the clock, imagining her walking through the door at any moment, but the minutes stretched endlessly, each one a reminder that the day meant so much to him, but she was somewhere else, carrying her own emotions, her own questions, her own search for clarity. The night settled in, and Ethan sat alone in the dim light of the apartment, heart heavy but still beating with hope, realizing that love was not always about certainty, but about patience, about understanding, about holding on to someone even when they drift for a moment, about believing that even when distance appears, it might lead to a deeper connection. And he whispered into the quiet room, "Come back to me, Claire. I'll wait." The next morning, Ethan woke with a hollow ache in his chest, the quiet of the apartment pressing in like a heavy weight, and his phone buzzed, breaking the stillness. It was a notification, a photo sent by one of Claire's friends, casual and innocent on the surface, but sharp as a knife to his heart. The image showed Claire at a luxurious resort, sunlight glinting off the pool behind her, her hair catching the breeze, her smile radiant, effortless, and unfamiliar to him in a way that made his stomach twist. A man stood close to her, confident, leaning in with a familiarity that stung. A silent hint of something Ethan had never been meant to see, and the caption was light, playful, as if the picture was nothing more than a fun getaway, but to Ethan, it screamed 1,000 questions he couldn't answer. His hands shook slightly as he set the phone down, pacing the room, trying to make sense of what he had seen, the image replaying in his mind over and over, each detail sharper, more painful. He remembered their shared plans, the morning he had imagined, the gentle routines they had woven over 10 years, and now it felt like a stranger had taken her smile for themselves, and he had been blind to it until this moment. Ethan thought of calling her immediately, demanding answers, feeling a mix of jealousy, heartbreak, and fear that twisted inside him. Yet part of him feared the confrontation might drive her further away or confirm a truth he wasn't ready to face. He remembered their early days, how she had laughed at his bad jokes, how her eyes had lit up when he surprised her, how even the smallest gestures had mattered in their quiet, ordinary life that had always felt extraordinary because they shared it, and now all of it seemed fragile, like it could shatter at any moment. The fear of losing her, of the life they had built together quietly unraveling, pressed on him relentlessly, and he realized that love was never just about holding on. It was about understanding, about patience, about surviving moments like these, where the heart and mind both waged silent battles. He remembered the anniversary gifts he had prepared, the bouquet tucked in the fridge, the tiny note he had planned to slip into her bag, and a wave of despair washed over him, knowing that the moments he had imagined were now stolen, replaced by a reality he wasn't prepared to face. The image haunted him. Claire smiling, the sunlight highlighting her cheekbones, the easy closeness she shared with a man he barely knew. And Ethan felt a mixture of anger and longing, each emotion cutting sharper than the last, making him wonder if he had failed to notice signs along the way, moments when she had pulled slightly away, smiles that were polite but distant, conversations where her mind had drifted elsewhere. He replayed every word, every touch, every laugh over the years, looking for cracks he might have missed, wondering if their love had been strong enough, or if it had been quietly eroded by routine, by silence, by unspoken frustrations he had thought trivial. He thought about the word space she had used, and now it carried a weight he hadn't anticipated, a meaning he couldn't ignore, suggesting not just distance, but a journey he hadn't been invited on, a private world where she could explore herself without him, and the idea terrified him, made him ache in a way that nothing else had. As he sat on the edge of the bed, staring at the floor, memories came rushing back. Late nights spent talking, mornings with coffee in hand, laughter echoing through empty rooms, quiet moments of shared comfort and understanding, and he realized that love, even after 10 years, was fragile, not because it was weak, but because it was alive, and living things changed, sometimes in ways that frightened those who cared the most. He remembered her voice, the softness in it even when she had asked for space, and the way she had avoided his gaze, and he realized she carried her own conflict, her own doubts and fears, and that perhaps the journey she was taking wasn't meant to hurt him, but to find clarity, to understand herself. And that realization brought a complex ache, part hope, part despair, part longing, that he hadn't known he could feel all at once. Hours passed like days as Ethan replayed the image over and over, imagining what her laughter sounded like in that sunlit place, imagining the conversations she might be having, imagining the life that existed outside of him, and every imagined scene made him ache with both jealousy and yearning, a strange mix of fear that he was losing her and hope that she might return, that this space was temporary, a pause rather than an ending. He thought of their friends, of family, of every little moment they had shared that made their marriage theirs alone, and he wondered if she was thinking of any of it, if she felt the same tug in her heart that he did, if she regretted leaving, or if she felt lighter, freer, happier in ways he couldn't yet imagine. Ethan felt the room closing in, the silence amplifying every heartbeat, every memory, every imagined scene of Claire somewhere else, and he realized that sometimes love demanded patience, sometimes it demanded courage, sometimes it demanded letting go, even when it hurt more than anything else, because the heart had to survive moments of distance to truly understand what it wanted. He thought about what he would say if he saw her again, how he would keep his voice calm, how he would let her speak first, how he would listen to the truth without judgment, because he knew that the words he had been waiting to hear were not just about their anniversary, not just about a moment, but about 10 years of shared life and the possibility of many more. He imagined the moment of reunion, the hesitation, the tentative smiles, the hands finding each other in silence, the eyes speaking the words they couldn't yet say aloud, and he felt both fear and hope twisting together in his chest, a reminder that love was never simple, never easy, never guaranteed, but always worth the risk. As evening approached, Ethan found himself pacing by the window, looking at the city lights, imagining Claire walking along the resort pool, imagining the wind in her hair, imagining the warmth of her hand that he longed to hold. And he realized that even though this morning had brought a shock, even though the image had cut deep, the love he felt was still alive, still patient, still willing to wait, still willing to believe that the story wasn't over. That night, he sat alone, heart heavy but unbroken, breathing in the quiet apartment, listening to the distant hum of the city, feeling the ache of absence and the pull of hope intertwined, whispering into the darkness, "Come back to me, Claire. I'm here. I'm waiting." Knowing that the journey ahead would be uncertain, that answers might be hard, but that love, the love they had built, was still strong enough to survive a moment like this, a moment where space became the test of hearts, and patience became the bridge back to each other, even when the road seemed long and every heartbeat reminded him of what he might lose. Ethan didn't sleep much that night, the image of Claire at the resort burning in his mind, a constant ache in his chest, a pull that wouldn't let him rest, and by morning, the decision was made almost instinctively. He had to see her, to understand, to feel the truth of what was happening, even if it terrified him, even if it meant confronting emotions he wasn't sure he could survive. He booked a flight quickly, heart pounding, mind racing with scenarios he couldn't control, rehearsing conversations and words, thinking of how he would approach her without anger, without accusation, but with honesty and love, because after 10 years, that was the only way he could bridge the distance between them. Arriving at the resort, his breath caught at the sight of her, radiant under the sun, carefree in a way that hurt as much as it delighted him, hair tousled by the breeze, laughter spilling into the air, a side of her he hadn't seen for months, a side that seemed both familiar and completely unknown, and he realized that seeing her this way both terrified and mesmerized him. She noticed him eventually, of course, The subtle pause in her steps, the quick glance over her shoulder, the way her hand lingered over the strap of her bag, a flicker of recognition, surprise, and guilt crossing her face all at once, emotions so complex that they made his chest tighten as he approached, careful to keep his voice calm, careful to keep his steps steady, even though inside he was trembling. "Claire," he said, voice low, almost breaking, and she turned fully then, eyes widening, and for a moment the world seemed suspended between them, neither speaking, both aware of the weight of unspoken words, of years of shared life condensed into a single glance. And in that moment, the tension of months dissolved into something fragile, electric, full of possibility and fear all at once. They walked toward each other slowly, carefully, as though afraid that rushing would shatter the fragile connection, and Ethan's mind swirled with a mix of longing, hurt, and love, remembering all the mornings, all the evenings, all the laughter and quiet moments that had built their bond. Moments that now felt both precious and fragile in the face of this unexpected distance. He wanted to speak first, to demand answers, to pour out his heart, but the look in her eyes made him pause, and instead, he let silence speak, letting her presence fill the space between them, letting the air carry the tension, letting the unsaid words hover like sparks before a fire ignites. Finally, she spoke, voice soft, hesitant, almost trembling. "Ethan, I didn't mean to hurt you." And he felt his chest tighten, the raw honesty in her tone cutting deeper than anger ever could, because he knew that her words were true, even if the reality was painful, even if she had sought a freedom he hadn't been able to give her, even if she had wandered into something new to understand herself. I needed to see if I still had myself outside of us," she admitted, eyes darting briefly to the horizon, to the sparkling water, to the man who had been near her, but immediately looking back at him. And Ethan felt a mixture of heartbreak and relief, understanding that this was not about replacing him, but about rediscovering her own identity, about finding clarity, about understanding what love meant when it was not bound by routine, when it was not confined by comfort, when it had to survive distance to prove its strength. The ache inside him twisted, sharp and deep, because the thought of her happiness apart from him was both unbearable and necessary, and he realized that love was not possession. Love was patience. Love was understanding. Love was seeing someone you cherish walk into their own light and hoping they choose to share it with you again. He remembered every tender gesture, every laugh, every conversation, every moment of quiet intimacy, and he felt a surge of determination, not to control her, not to demand her return, but to show her that the love they had built was worth holding on to, worth fighting for, worth the risk of vulnerability, worth the patience and honesty required to rebuild what distance had unsettled. They walked along the edge of the resort's pool, the water sparkling in the sunlight, reflecting both the beauty of the world and the complexity of their emotions, and each step was tentative, careful, deliberate, because neither wanted to rush, neither wanted to break the fragile bridge forming between them, and each word spoken, each silence held, carried the weight of 10 years of shared life, of hopes, of disappointments, of dreams both fulfilled and deferred. And Ethan realized that this moment, suspended between past and future, pain and possibility, was a turning point, a moment that could define the next chapter of their lives together. Claire spoke of the loneliness she had felt, the quiet moments of doubt, the dreams she had buried beneath the routines of marriage, the longing for self-discovery she had hidden even from herself, and Ethan listened, heart aching with empathy, understanding, and love, absorbing every word, letting it reach him fully, because he knew that only by hearing her truth could they hope to heal, could they hope to find the connection that had once been effortless, that had once been the center of their lives. He reached for her hand slowly, carefully, not demanding, but offering, and she let him take it, the fingers intertwining, tentative, but real, and the contact sparked something deep inside both of them, a reminder that the bond they shared was not broken, only tested, challenged, stretched across uncertainty, and that love, when nurtured, could survive moments like this, could grow stronger through honesty, patience, and forgiveness. They talked for hours, not in loud confessions or dramatic accusations, but in quiet truths, the kind that build trust, the kind that heal wounds, the kind that allow hearts to reconnect in ways deeper than the surface ever allows. And Ethan realized that while the path forward would not be simple, while misunderstandings, distance, and hurt had left their marks, The foundation of their love, 10 years of shared life, laughter, comfort, and support, was still strong enough to guide them toward a new beginning. As the sun dipped toward the horizon, painting the sky with soft pinks and golds, Ethan and Claire sat side by side, watching the light shimmer across the water, hands still clasped, hearts tentative but hopeful, knowing that love was not about perfect days, perfect moments, or uninterrupted happiness, but about choosing each other again and again, even when the world threatened to pull them apart. And in that quiet evening, amidst the gentle breeze and the glow of possibility, they felt a fragile, tentative reconnection. A reminder that the journey of love was ongoing, that forgiveness and understanding were its strongest pillars, and that even after distance, even after fear, even after heartbreak, the heart could still find its way home, toward the person who had been its anchor for 10 years and might yet be its companion for many more. As the sun lowered, painting the resort in soft gold and pink hues, Ethan and Claire walked slowly along the water's edge, each step measured, each glance full of unspoken questions, the gentle breeze carrying the scent of the sea and the quiet weight of their emotions. And in that silence, both felt the truth of the past weeks pressing upon them, the fear, the longing, the misunderstandings, and the undeniable love that had brought them together 10 years ago and still lingered despite distance. Claire spoke softly about the emptiness she had felt, the nights when she had thought about the life she shared with Ethan, but felt a strange void, a need to rediscover herself, a longing for clarity that had nothing to do with leaving him, but everything to do with finding the version of herself that had been buried beneath years of routine, compromise, and the comfort of familiarity. And Ethan listened, heart aching with empathy, understanding that love was not always about possession, but about patience, about allowing someone the space to grow even when it frightened you, even when it left a hollow ache in your chest. He spoke in return, voice steady, though emotions churned beneath the surface, telling her that he had felt the absence, the quiet moments that had stretched endlessly, the hollow echo of her smile missing in the apartment, the questions that had haunted him since the morning she had said she needed space, and he shared his fears, his love, his hope that whatever she discovered about herself, they could face it together because the foundation they had built, the shared life, laughter, quiet mornings, evenings full of conversation and comfort, was too precious to let go of lightly. They stopped near a quiet stretch of sand where the waves lapped gently, and for a long moment, neither spoke, just holding hands, letting the contact remind them of years spent together, of the resilience that had carried them through struggles, misunderstandings, and ordinary days that had been extraordinary because they faced them together. Claire admitted, almost in a whisper, that the journey she had taken was frightening, that seeing herself outside of their life had been liberating, but also terrifying, because it made her realize how much she valued the life they had built, how much she loved Ethan, and how much she did not want to lose the connection that had been her anchor. Ethan felt a surge of relief, tempered by the lingering ache of jealousy and fear, and he squeezed her hand gently, reminding her that love was strongest when it allowed freedom, when it encouraged honesty, when it embraced vulnerability rather than demanding control. And in that moment, Claire felt the safety she had been searching for, the reassurance that even when the world pulled them in different directions, their hearts could still meet, could still choose each other, could still find a path back from uncertainty. They walked further, sharing memories, laughter slowly returning, the tension easing like a tide receding, each step a silent vow to rebuild what had been shaken, to nurture what had always been precious, to honor the love that had endured through 10 years, and the conversation flowed naturally, without accusation, without blame. Only honesty, understanding, and the quiet recognition that mistakes, doubts, and moments of longing were part of being human, part of loving deeply, part of creating a bond that could survive challenges and emerge stronger. Ethan suggested small plans, simple gestures, moments of connection that could rebuild intimacy without pressure, and Claire agreed, her eyes lighting up with hope, a fragile but genuine smile returning as she realized that love was not static, that it required effort, attention, patience, and forgiveness, and that even after distance, even after fear, even after temporary separations, it could grow, deepen, and flourish. They paused to watch the sunset, golden light shimmering on the water, a perfect reflection of the fragile beauty of their renewed connection. And in the quiet, Claire rested her head against Ethan's shoulder, a gesture of trust, of comfort, of a heart slowly letting go of fear and embracing love once more. They talked about the future, dreams they had put aside, moments they wanted to share, and the possibilities seemed endless, not because life was simple, but because they were willing to face it together, to communicate, to honor each other's needs, and to rebuild the intimacy that distance had reminded them was precious. As darkness fell and stars began to twinkle overhead, Ethan felt a mixture of contentment and anticipation, the quiet understanding that love was a journey, not a destination, that each day required choice, courage, and the willingness to be vulnerable. And in holding Claire's hand, feeling the warmth, the pulse, the connection, he understood that they had survived the storm of doubt and distance, that their hearts had found each other again, that the love which had been tested by space and uncertainty was stronger, more conscious, and more resilient than ever. Claire whispered softly, gratitude and relief in her voice, that she didn't want to lose what they had, that the journey had reminded her of how much Ethan meant to her, how intertwined their lives were, and how deeply she loved him. And Ethan responded not with grand declarations, but with quiet reassurance, steady presence, and the promise of shared patience, kindness, and attention that would carry them forward. They walked slowly back to the resort, hands still entwined, hearts cautiously hopeful, knowing that challenges might come again, that life was unpredictable, but also knowing that the choice to hold on to each other, to communicate openly, to embrace growth together, was the choice that truly mattered. In that gentle evening, amidst the quiet lapping of waves and the warm glow of lights reflecting on the water, Ethan and Claire found a fragile equilibrium, a renewed sense of connection, a reminder that love required work, forgiveness, and courage, but that it could survive even moments of fear, distance, and uncertainty. And as they sat on the balcony later, watching the resort lights shimmer in the distance, a gentle sense of peace settled over them, the kind of peace born not from perfection, but from resilience, understanding, and the willingness to choose each other every day, even after the heart has been tested, even when the mind has been uncertain. And in that peaceful silence, both realized that the journey of love was ongoing, that their story was still being written, and that the promise of many more sunsets together, of laughter, of shared dreams, of quiet, tender moments awaited them if they continued to walk hand in hand, hearts open, trust renewed, and love chosen once again.